Beyond the headlines. This is World Insight.
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. At the recently concluded World Economic Forum in Davos, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney delivered a speech that electrified the room, warning this:
that the rules-based order is fading, that the strong can do what they can and the weak must suffer what they must.
After that, the U.S. threw at Ottawa its tariff threats. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has called on all Canadians to, quote, buy Canadian and build Canadian toward economic sovereignty. Earlier, China and Canada have agreed to build a new type of strategic partnership, a pragmatic shift toward mutual resilience. To understand why this consensus is a win-win amid global trade shocks, I caught up exclusively with Graham Shantz, the president of the Canada-China Business Council. The EVs, we see the deal between China and Canada. It's about reducing the tariffs on the Chinese EV into Canada, but there's a cap over there. Meanwhile, China has also lowered the tariffs on some of the farm products coming from Canada into China. Tell us how this balance of deal is being done.
It's great to see. You've got to situate these tariffs in the context of the respective economics and diplomatic relations, trade relations. That was set up, it appeared from my perspective, by the two governments as the standoff. So that had to be dealt with, and it's great to see that there's an agreement. The details of which have a certain number of vehicles, I think it's 49,000 initially, rising to 70,000 down the road, inside the structure that you mentioned. But as a former trade negotiator, I know exactly how that fits, and it's good to see that rising over time. From a Canadian interest perspective, what I found most interesting and important in terms of what the Prime Minister said on the very specific details of EVs, is that China is a world leader in the technology and in the production. And it's a value proposition that will have the effect, and he took some pains to talk about the price point coming into Canada. As a Canadian, it's a lower price point than others can supply the Canadian market, which is super important in terms of the transition on vehicles, because at the moment, EVs are almost unobtainable by normal Canadians, if I can put it that way. So it's good to see that that's part of the consideration. But equally importantly, it's not just the sale of cars manufactured in China into the Canadian market. It's a commitment to see the possibility of assembly operations in Canada by Chinese EV manufacturers over time. My own hometown is in an area that's in the middle of the car industry in Canada. Southern Ontario, a little town called Waterloo, has a famous university, but it's in that whole zone, that belt is the auto zone in Canada. So it was great to see that there's the possibility of assembly in Canada, which is really important because we have a very good world-leading parts manufacturing operations in that area, some of which have actually come over here and have substantial investments in China.
Now, Mr. President, there were a lot of discussions, if not rhetorics, between Canada and your neighbor about the auto industry, whether one needs or the other or not, and what is the nature of this interaction. Now, how do you see this China negotiation with Canada with the backdrop of that and the overall evolvement of the auto industry in the world?
Yeah, you're taking me back to the negotiating room in the late 1990s for China joining the World Trade Organization. And at that time, it was really the European original equipment manufacturers and the US original equipment manufacturers through their negotiators, their respective negotiators, trying to gain access into the China market. So if you flash forward to today and you see the light vehicle sales in China, which are something like 25 million a year, I think the US market the European market is something like 22 million a year. The US market is maybe 16, 18 million. Nobody would have predicted in 1998, 1999, 2000 that the Chinese market for personal motor vehicles, light motor vehicles, would be that number, and nobody would have predicted that it would be electric. That the majority now, as I understand it, of sales in China and on the EVs. So it's a remarkable turnaround, which I can say I've witnessed in terms of the quality of air around the roads in Beijing, to pick one example.
And as a result of that, what does that mean for Canada to be sustainable in the industry when you talk about this deal between China and Canada, not only on the cap, on the tariffs, but also on the future investment into Canada?
Well, I think we'll remain a very attractive investment proposition. I think we'll continue to have a very vibrant automotive parts and final assembly. And Canada itself has trade agreements, free trade agreements, with a host of other countries, including access to the European market. So while some Chinese manufacturers would normally think, well, why go to Canada just to get access to the US market? The answer to that is, well, you're gaining access to the Canadian market. You're also gaining access to the European market in terms of assembly. And given the quality of our workforce, the tax rates that we have, I think it will be attractive for inbound investment from China.
Many of the farmers in Canada are also applauding right now because we have seen the reduction of tariffs against the Canadian farm products by China. So what does that mean? How much impact will that make?
I think it'll make a lot of impact for Canadian farmers, as well as we have meat producers as well, and in canola, on pulses. There was a deal on pet food, which is also affecting our agricultural sector, on seafood. So for the farmers and the ranchers and the seafood harvesters and the seafood production, it means a lot. And stepping back, I think from China's perspective, Canada should be viewed, whether it's on farm products, agricultural products, as a trading partner in general. We're politically stable. We've been having access into the China market from even before we had political diplomatic relations. We had wheat sales. So the quality is there, the reliability is there, our political stability is there. So as a diversified supplier into the China market on the agriculture, agri-food, food, value-added food, Canada should be viewed inside China as a long-term and reliable trading partner that can go through the ups and downs and the waves on the international ocean, if you will.
Can China or others trust the capability of this administration to implement the results of the discussion?
I think so. I think it's a commitment that will stand the test of time. To my earlier point about the need to diversify, that's, in my judgment, that's not going to go away. If I look at areas that are a priority for Canada, which include renewable energy as we try to meet our climate change commitments, China's a major producer of solar, of wind. Now, wait, I'm going to sound old, but when I came here first to China in 1981,
I'd like to hear history.
There were 60 gigawatts of power installed in China. There were 80 gigawatts of power in Canada. So again, to be clear, Canada produced more electricity in 1980, 1981 than China did when I came here for the very first time. And now you look at Canada, which has something like, I think from memory, I'm not an expert, but 150, 160 of gigawatt capacity. I know there's a dam being built or a power facility being built in Western China, in Xizang, and it's going to have a capacity of, I think, 70 gigawatts. So that's more than the capacity that existed when I first came to this country in 1981.
When we look at the latest result of the discussion, one would also like to look at the role of your organization, because you have been, shall I describe it as consistent over the years, not flip-flopping, not just going with the wind. So what does that mean for you as an organization with 300 members, Canadian businesses, to be consistent over the years when the politics is ups and down between the two countries?
It's been very important for us. It's our 48th year right now. We're almost on the verge of 50 years.
Congratulations.
I thank you very much.
Right in the middle of youth.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. We get wisdom at 60, I think, under Confucianism. So we're getting close to wisdom. But that consistency is critical for our members. The members have interests in China. We've grown from a small organization of a small number of companies in 1978. And you can imagine when this organization was formed at that time, that it was truly visionary, because I don't think even the founders thought that China's economy would grow so quickly that its weight in the global economy would become so important so quickly. And so it has been important from day one to be that bridge, so that when the governments are in a moment when they're not talking as much as what we might think they need to talk, we're there. We reflect the personal connections, business connections. This organization has universities and colleges and even high schools. We have regional development, economic development organizations, tourism as members. So it's a broad-based membership. It's unlike some of the other bilateral chambers that are foreign bilateral chambers in China, which tend to be big companies. Right. We've got big and small, and the founding DNA of this organization was a handful of big companies try to help some smaller Canadian companies get access into China. So it's not just their elbows up fighting for their piece of a pie. It's actually been more an almost a social commitment back in Canada to assist smaller companies in Canada to understand the Chinese market, to benefit from China's economic growth.
Canada is located in a place in which your biggest neighbor is the United States. And meanwhile, we have also seen the phrase of so-called Western Hemisphere becoming ever popular in some of the headline stories. So, Mr. President, tell me more about how do you assess your neighborhood, and as a result of the latest changes, what does that mean for Canada? And what does that mean for Canada's relationship with China, even though we are celebrating a great result after this time's negotiation and meeting?
Well, I think we've built on the trade side, we have been building over the years an architecture of trade agreements globally, much like China has. In our case, if you look at the CPTPP, for example, the Canada-Europe agreement, it's an expression of a desire by previous governments, reinforced by this government, to diversify our export market. I think it's fair to say what's going on in the Western Hemisphere, in North America, is a reminder of the importance that business needs to take advantage of those agreements to diversify their own interests, investment interests, export interests as well, to the benefit of prosperity in Canada as well. What's new now is it's great to see a political emphasis, the visit of the Prime Minister here, which is very important. There was one little small piece of what was announced yesterday, which included Canada's desire and China's support for Canada to host APEC in the year 2029. The last time Canada hosted APEC, from my memory, was 1997. So it will have been, by that point, almost 33, 34 years since Canada hosted APEC. My point is the political signaling by doing that is the answer to your question. And I think it's very important not only to have the architecture of a framework agreement through trade agreements. I think it's important that the political signaling be viewed as well, to show to the Canadian businesses, to Canadian communities, the importance of Asia to Canada's economic security.
Can Canada have the guts and the wisdom to be independent, no matter what?
Canada's always had the guts to be independent, so I have no doubt about that, and I think we have the wisdom as well.
Hey there, global listeners. Get ready for the hottest discussions on the airwaves. Roundtable, your passport to the heart of China's buzzing society. Pressing issues, lifestyle trends, and impactful policies, we're tackling them head on with wit, wisdom, and a whole lot of fun. Discover the real China through the eyes and voices of its people. Gain a unique global perspective on topics that resonate universally. Tune in and turn up the excitement dial on Roundtable as we bridge gaps and break barriers one discussion at a time. Don't just listen, be transformed.
Zoom in on global affairs with insightful debates and exclusive interviews. This is World Insight.
South Korean trade officials head to Washington this week after U.S. administration announced a sharp tariff hike on South Korean imports from 15% to 25%, citing delays in Seoul's legislative approval of a 2025 bilateral trade pact. The escalation comes as the World Trade Organization warns of a deepening tariff shock seen to dampen global trade growth through 2026. As the rules-based multilateral system faces its most severe test in decades, the question remains, can global markets withstand rising trade barriers, or could these mean long-term trade fragmentation? For more insights, my exclusive interview with Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, WTO Director General. In the reform, you have been talking to both your staff and to the international community about how to preserve, how to reform, and how to follow up and update the WTO system for the new trends. Among them, do you prioritize? Obviously, you cannot do all the things all at the same time. How to prioritize them?
But I think the way you put it, Tianwei, is very, very good. Because I think the first objective in my second term is to say, what is it that works? What works for the global trading system at the WTO? And there are some very important things that work that I alluded to. The fact that 72% of world trade is still on WTO terms today. It's down from 80% at the beginning of the year pre-tariffs. But now we're still at 72%. That's a high number. How do we preserve that? The second thing is, what are the other rules within the WTO that are important we need to preserve? We have the WTO helps to set standards on human safety and product safety in trade. It builds trust. How do we preserve that? Most members value that. So secondly, we have other agreements on intellectual property protection, for instance, that are also very valued by the business community. How do we preserve that? So preserving what works. The second is to ask the question, what doesn't work? We cannot be complacent. We have many things, many challenges to fix. And that is, so the priority number one is preserving what works. Priority number two is fixing what does not work. And among that, we have issues to look at. There are several that are important. One, how we make decisions. The world is changing very, very fast, with technology advancing and AI at a fast pace. The organization needs to be more nimble, more flexible, more swift to deliver for the world. And so we have a consensus decision-making system, unanimity, which is very valuable, meaning the smallest member has the same power as the largest. But we need to make it work better, so that we can make decisions faster. So
plurilateral, for example?
That means, what that can translate into is that perhaps when there's an issue to solve, a coalition of willing members who find that issue very important can get together and decide to work on it and to come to an agreement, and other members who do not particularly want to join can let them get ahead with it. So more flexible plurilaterals and decision-making systems, that could be one. Looking at issues of fair trade, many members complain about each other's trading practices. The issue is, can we be very candid and specific? What is it that is not fair? How do we solve those unfair? How do we, how do we give incentives so that members can do the right thing? How do we become more transparent? So that is another set of reforms we can look at. So just to give you a couple of examples of some of the priority things we need to look at. Then the last thing, the last set of issues to look at is there are many exciting things happening in the trade world. We've got digital trade, we've got the advent of AI. By the way, our latest World Trade Report that looks at the role of AI in trade indicates what we call 40 by 40, that the value of trade could increase by 40% by 2040 with AI. But that means we also have to have the right policies in place. If we don't, it could result in some countries being left behind. How do we look at these new issues and encourage digital trade, green trade, other aspects of trade, services trade, which is growing very fast?
Madam Director General, there are quite a number of myths about WTO. When it comes to people's rhetoric against WTO, there are also a lot of myths about the realities of trade today in our world. For example, whether trade redirection is after, for example, China and the United States in tariff war, the trade will go to other places and flood the markets. There are a lot of myths like that that's not based on statistics and data. How does the WTO help its members to come to realize what is the reality of trade today?
Well, we are evidence-based and we monitor. And I have to say, the evidence is showing us trade between China and the US is going down, and that trade is going elsewhere. Okay, but members need to look at it. And we've said to members, look at it. If you feel that something is happening with the trade, the first thing is have a dialogue with China and discuss it and see how you can manage this. The second is WTO has so many tools within its toolbox that can help members to talk to each other and manage these issues of trade. We have a lot of tools, and I think some members are using it. So that's the way to go. The WTO is a platform for dialogue. So I think there's plenty of opportunity to settle these things in an amicable way.
Right. And not let the myths spread around, but rather let the data spread around.
Let the data and the evidence show. We always go out when we're evidence-based. That's why we didn't say anything until we were looking at the data of most favored nation, how much of trade is going on, and we showed that, wow, 72% is going on.
What do you make of the current reality of global governance as the Director General of WTO, which is the one and only in the world on global trading system?
Well, I think that the multilateral trading system that was built over 80 years ago, and global governance in general, has centered around developing institutions for global cooperation. There are so many problems in the world that cannot be solved by one country alone. And that is why you need multilateral cooperation. Let's just take pandemics. Tomorrow we could see another one. There isn't a single country on its own that can deal with a pandemic. You need global cooperation to be able to come up with answers. So multilateral institutions are needed. But there's no doubt that they need to reform so that they can be able to deal more swiftly with the problems of today and tomorrow. So I think multilateralism is key. I think it needs to be reformed to be nimbler, swifter. And I think China has been a strong supporter of multilateralism, and at the WTO, a strong support, especially with dealing with developing countries in terms of capacity building and support. And we hope that countries that are major economies and leaders will continue to find a way to, yes, help solve global problems through international cooperation, through global institutions.
China has been making it very clear that China supports the international trade system with the WTO at its core. We have also been hearing from the Chinese leaders talking about the global governance initiative. Well, this is just one of those many initiatives in terms of global governance that China has in mind. What do you make of these efforts?
We think it's a good thing. As I said, you need global institutions to solve global problems and deal with global public goods that cannot be dealt with by any one country. So good global governance is important.
In bringing in young trade leaders into the conversation of WTO, and also to bring in the voices coming from the global south, developing countries, especially the least developed economies. Now, how much do you think that conversation can continue, given the fact that some describe the world today, it is the rules of the jungle?
Well, first of all, let me thank my colleagues in the organization, because the staff of the WTO and the managers worked really hard, so I want to give them credit. But that being said, it's so fabulous to have young global leaders. It's so fabulous to think of trying to give the South as much of a voice. The young global leaders are important because we need to listen to the young people. They are the next generation of the future. They need to tell us, is this trading organization being relevant for our issues? Is it delivering for us? What does it need to do to change the way it is doing business? I really like to listen to young people. I like to listen to the business community and to civil society. Okay, so for us, it's very refreshing. And then in terms of the South, developing countries and least developed countries join this organization, expecting the organization to help them prosper their people more. And one of the purposes of the WTO, or the purpose, is to enhance living standards, to help create employment and to support sustainable development. And the question least developed countries and other poor countries are asking is it doing this? So it's important to enhance their voice and say, look, we need to do better. They have been stagnating at 1% of trade. The 44 least developed countries are only 1% of world trade. Is that sufficient? The answer is no. We need to do more. And it is good that China is opening up its markets. It has announced zero tariffs for African countries. I hope they can take adequate advantage of these opportunities so they can trade more, expand their share of the markets. Africa's share of global trade is less than 3% and has not been increasing for many years. So whatever China can do to encourage that. The second thing to encourage that also is investment. We need to deal with the risk perception of developing countries that they are too risky. We need supply chains to decentralize to developing countries, create jobs, create value so they can trade more.
And that's all the time we have for today. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of the team. Thanks for being with us. That's all.